morning. And we're going to continue right where we left off. So at the end of the last part of the project build, we were building an app that eventually our goal was to make Breaking Better a Breaking Bad support group for Breaking Buds. And our goal was to get all of the characters, allow users to see all of the characters in Breaking Bad using a Breaking Bad API, select one of those characters, find out more details about them. And then our eventual goal is to be able to add messages, like give each Breaking Bad character a supportive message to let them know that we're all thinking about them, and then see those messages. And then eventually our final goal will be to make each message associated with a user and make it so you have to log in order to access our app. Cool. So what we have so far is a run file, right? That allows us to see all characters. Then we can select Jesse Pinkman and you get some details on Jesse, right? And then it'll send us back to our main menu. I can be like, hey, I want to see all characters again. I can see Skylar now. And then I can eventually exit. And it says, thanks for helping our Breaking Bad besties get back on their feet. So that's the app as we currently have it. The way we built this out was we create a run file that, in the case of our app structure, does a couple of interesting things for the sake of organization. We require this relative config/environment.rb, which is going to do, first off, require bundler for us. So I went over bundler last on Tuesday. If you bundler is absolutely not required. It is not even like something they look for. It is a helpful tool that you're going to learn about later. So if you just like, all it's doing for us is it's requiring our gems for us and allowing, like, giving some additional tools for keeping track of those gems. But you can always go ahead and just require those gems yourself by just like writing require up top. Just keep in mind that if you do that, someone might have to run and be like, oh, I need to gem install TTY prompt before I can use it. Bundler solves that problem by just giving you a bundle install command that installs all the gems in your bundler. It's just a tool. Then we are requiring all of our models right here. So you'll notice that our run file requires this, and this is going to do all the requiring for us. And then we are also requiring the seeds thing that just goes ahead and creates all of our characters for us. So it hits our Breaking Bad API once, gets a response, and then for each item it sends back, it populates our characters. Remember that character.new, we're just doing this the old-fashioned way. It has an add all pushed into self. So at the end of this, we should have a list of 138 characters or so, which is how many characters I guess Breaking Bad has, according to the API. So altogether, that's our organization for our app. Our app has a CLI class that's handling the actual workings of like making this run. So we start by we're using T2I prompt, which is a gem I showed, which gives a bunch of alternatives to just get.strip and gives us more options for how to query a user. Also completely optional. Feel free to use get.strip. Then it's going to welcome people. Then it's going to run our little menu. Say like, hey, what do you want to do? See all characters or exit. And then we have a little case statement to show all the characters or exit. Then once we show all the characters, right, it's going to allow us to say, which character would you like to view? It's going to print out each one of those characters. It's going to allow us to select one of the characters. And then it's going to print out a little menu that for now just prints their details. Eventually, we're going to want to like add some features here that'll be like, here's all their details. Do you want to add a message? Do you want to see all their messages? Things like that. Cool. So that's our current app structure. Does anyone have any questions about how our app's structured before I dive right into it?
Yeah. Can you just click into the Breaking Bad API file just so I can kind of?
Yeah,
Okay,
I use HTTP party instead of this. Does the exact same thing as these 3 lines.
got it.
So this is a really simple class. Could it have been done outside of a class? Sure. Does doing this mean that like this is pretty straightforward? I'll be like, cool, Breaking Bad. I can call Breaking Bad.new and then I can call response on it. Um, encapsulates logic for us so that it's not just out there in the world, and so that we can import it in different places. Um, this is one of the structures, this sort of service class right here that doesn't seem to do anything and that doesn't seem to have any methods, is one of those things that feels, I think, the most pointless to phase one students. Just because you're just like, well, I could just write this line of code directly in it. Um, and you're right to a certain extent. Um, generally speaking, people who have spent a lot of time developing like organized OO code, such as people who have taught phase one and then taught JavaScript, which is and like build out games and things like that, it feels way better to put something in a class for an object oriented developer. Because then you just know, like, cool, I call new, it works, and I don't have to worry about what's inside of it. I don't have to worry about keeping track of things. Every time I found myself just coding in like a big block of random code, I always find myself a little disorganized. Wish I had done stuff in classes. So it's my first tendency is to put something in the class when it wants to encapsulate a little bit of logic and then return something. If you're still confused by that, I get it, and you can ignore like this level of abstraction, right? Like this is something arguably I could have just done like this, and I think it would still work. Um, I get it. If you want to just do that, that's fine. Um, the moment you start wanting to put methods on it or give it different functions, put it in a class. Um, and know that I'm going to be the one throwing them in classes all the time. So at this point, did that answer your question or just make things weirder?
I think it answered my question. I was curious what you did to get your characters into like the character class from there, because that's just going to give you a bunch of data, right?
Yeah, Breaking Bad API .new gives us a response, right? Let's call this BB equals
Mm-hmm.
cool. bb.first.response.first is going to be a hash, right?
Right.
So what I did is I knew that like I'm not going to be adding my own OC characters to Breaking Bad. Like the show's done. We're not adding new characters to Breaking Bad. Um, so I was like, I don't really want to create a situation where a user can add information, right? So the only way that a character is really going to be initialized, right, is from this hash. So I built my initialize method around taking in this hash. So if I call bb.response.first, right, I'm going to get Walter White again. So I'll just be like ww. Cool. Character.new, do ww. And that's going to create a character from that hash. So I turned that hash into an object.
Mhm.
And now character.all, that last, is going to be Bryan Cranston. And we're going to have 2 copies of Bryan Cranston here.
Okay.
Cool.
Would it also be hmm, and then for just any character, you would have to find that character's index or like that character's index in the array of hashes that you have?
I
Would you
don't
just
think so. In this case, right? Let's go ahead. we have a pry? Yes, we do. Character dot all, right? I wouldn't recommend using like indexes at all. We've built this method called find by name. That's actually going to be super helpful, right? I could be like find by name. I can go ahead and say Walter White.
Right. My question is if you wanted to initialize a new character that was say, because when you first pull the characters from the API, you're getting an array of hashes, right?
Yeah.
And then if you wanted to get a character that was like the fifth hash in the array, and make a new character with that, then are you just calling, like how do you do that?
Yeah, if I just wanted to create the fifth character, right? I could go ahead and go like BB's Breaking Bad new, right? You can go ahead and say, let's go ahead and see what's BB response 6. That's gonna be Mike Ehrmantraut. So right, if I wanted to, right, I could go ahead here and I can go ahead and say character dot new and pass in just the 6th item. And then I'd have 2 copies of I'd have to do like a little select here. So yeah, after this, I would have 2 copies of Mike Ehrmantraut because I've already seeded it all once, right? If I do it again, I'd have 3. But what I just did, rather than like using the index and grabbing each of them and putting them in, I just said for every single character that you sent back, create a character from it. So that's what allows me to avoid using an index altogether. I'm just iterating through each of them, saving all of them as characters. Cool. So now we're going to add the feature to add a message. First thing I want to do, messages sound like they're going to be their own model. I think that makes sense. For now, before I like add this user functionality and like a user can create a message, I'm just going to make it so that you can anonymously post messages. And then we're going to add the user feature later because the MVP would just be messages and we don't have to worry about login. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and create a message.rb class message. And we can have like some def initialize. Now, there's a bunch of different things we can do here, right? In terms of our choices for how we initialize a message and keep track of data, right? So like generally speaking, a character is going to have many messages, right? Like each character is going to have a bunch of messages. Now, being that we're in Ruby, that we're not limited to SQL databases, we can store each message on the characters. That sounds like a bad idea though. Just to me, like I would much rather have the message keep track of which character it belongs to. Especially because eventually I'm going to also need to be taking in a piece of user information and getting like the user, like being like, cool, give me all the users' messages. If they're all stored in characters is going to be really, really hard. So the like general rule I gave you all was, hey, if one has many of like, if A has many of B, B should be keeping track of its relationship to A rather than the other way around. If a teacher has many students, the student should keep track of what teacher they have. Cool. That's just the general principle for how I like to save data so that it exists within single source of truth. So right here, message is going to initialize with content. And I'm also going to say, hey, it should initialize with a character. We should keep track of which character it wasn't like the message belongs to, right? Does that make sense? We need to keep track of which message belongs to which character somewhere. And this is where I decided to put it. We'll go ahead and say content. character. Content character. I'm gonna do, whoops. I'm gonna do a little edit all self. Edit all equals loop. Def self dot all. Edit all. Cool. Try that in the pry. Character, or sorry, message dot all. Oh, this is why we try things on the pry. You gotta require it. Cool. If I go ahead and say character equals character dot first, we call this Walt. Dot all dot first. Shameful. Cool. So we've got Walt right here, right? And now in order to create a message, we need something like message dot new. And we can go ahead and say your chem class inspired me to cook methamphetamine. Really supportive. And then we go ahead and say, hey, this message is going to go to Walt, right? And now you'll notice we now have a message, right? We didn't add a attribute reader, right? So we should probably do that. Content, character. I didn't mean for that to be, that's like very powerful combination of two words, but not in this purpose. Cool. But this now works, right? We can go ahead. Let's try this again. Cool. Now we can go ahead and see message dot all dot first dot character dot actor. You'll be like Bryan Cranston. And then we can go ahead and say content too. And you can see that, like, cool, we have all this data here, right? So we just built out a message class. This works. We haven't put it into our app yet, but it has definitely been a very long time since our last commit. And we know it works. We've tested this out. We're good right now. Cool. Now, let's say I wanted to, right? Like, this was annoying going like, doing this like, first get me Walt character dot all dot first equals Walt. And then like after that being like message dot new hi Walt. How can I make it so I could call something like Walt dot add message? Hey, what would I have to do to make that work? Right now, messages are initialized with content and a character. What if I wanted to make it so that I could tell a character to add a message and then only take in the argument for what the content of that message was? This is going back a couple of weeks at this point.
You could put an add message method in the message class.
So I'm calling this on very close. We're calling this on Walt, right? Who's a character.
Mhm.
So which class should we throw it in?
Character.
Yeah. Def. Add message. Message or content. What will we do now? Anyone know? This one's really bring us back. I'm gonna pull these side by side.
Self.message.new or self. Yeah.
So self.message, right? Isn't a thing, right? Because we're on character. Character doesn't yet know its message and wouldn't know a single message because there's a lot of them, but very close, right?
Like a message gets input for the string to get the well, no, you have to get the content first to pass that along as an argument. Then you would you would message new with that string and the character you wanted to use.
And then which character would we want to use?
Oh,
Self.
Bingo. Great job, y'all. Yeah, so what we're doing right here is we're just going ahead and we're creating a method for a character that just creates a new message taking in content. Let's test out that that works. Cool. Go ahead and say ww equals character dot all dot first. Cool. ww dot add message teachers are great. And now if we take a look, it gives us a message back. And if we do message dot all, we now have a message. Cool. Cool. So next up, right, we should probably, just to make sure that this is a very quickly testable thing before we add our new features, I'm going to start saving some stuff into our database so that we can go ahead and have some messages pre-associated. I created the seeds file, right, that stores all of our characters. We can also have this start creating different messages. So I can go ahead and say, Walt equals character dot all that first, right? Walt dot add message happy teacher appreciation day. I can't type today. Go ahead and say Walt dot add message here. Keep grinding. Cool. And now if we go back, right, we can test that this works. Oh. One too many E's. Message dot all. It's going to have 3 different messages. Now we have some stuff we can test our app with, which is awesome. Because our next step is going to be to actually display these messages. So it would be helpful if we didn't have to like create them every time. Cool. So at this point, we can actually start incorporating this into our app. So currently our workflow. Sorry, let's get rid of this. Looks like this. Ruby run.rb. CL characters. And we can see Walter White. And we see this data, right? Then it goes, what would you like to do? CL characters or exit? Well, what I would instead like it to do be like, see messages, add a message, and then eventually like go back to all characters, right? So let's start building this out. So we have this character menu that we go into, right? Where we pass in a character. And then we can print out its details, and then it just goes back to the main menu. This is eventually where we want to build out our different features to like see different messages, stuff like that. Cool. So first off, there's one thing I could do to make this behave a little bit differently. I'm about to have to chain a lot of messages passing in a character argument. Right? When like someone selects a character, I'm gonna have to like use character a lot, right? Can we think of a way to keep track of character between methods here? And this is a design decision. Like I could decide, you know what, I want to be safe. I want to call like pass in this argument every single time. But I could also right here, go ahead and store an instance variable called @character, right? And then have character menu just call on character. And as long as I have an attribute reader up here, right? We know this will only be called, character menu will only be called when a character has already been selected, right? We've got this right here. And you'll see that this still works, I hope. See all characters, Jesse Pinkman, and it still works. We can still go back to, we can still print all of them. If we go to see all characters, we now can switch it to a different one. You might want to be safe and be like, hey, every time they get to menu @character equals nil, right? Whenever they leave the character menu and go back to the main menu, let's get rid of that old saved character. You don't have to. That's some weird stuff what I just showed you. Who's confused? Yeah. Defining this right here, right, says an instance variable, which means now it's being tracked by the entire instance of the CLI class, right? So now I can just call character whenever I want using this attribute reader. And then if they select a different character, this show characters method will overwrite it. So now I can go ahead and say, instead of menu here, I can go ahead and do another. What would you like to do here? Cool. And then I'm going to start adding some additional features. So I can say, see messages, right? Cool. And I put a little bit of the cart before the horse here, right? I can call see messages, right? And now it goes, here's where we show the messages. I might actually go ahead and move this print detail. Make that a thing that you can like do as an option, but like not do every time. I'll pass this in.
What is print details?
Print details is a method that I'm going to actually show you right now because that is a very good question. Character dot print details, then character menu. We built this little method right here called print details that just prints out the details about the character. Let's make sure that I got that right because I just did way too many things at once. See all characters, Jesse Pinkman. You see the name. You can now click see messages. It says here's where we'd show the messages, and then it'll go back over here. If I want to then see his details again, I can do that by doing 2, right? Also put a little sleep at the top of this if I want to make this a little bit more obvious that we're doing different things. For a second. Cool. Which character would you like to view? Skylar. We see that option. We can hit see messages. Here's where we show our messages. Then it goes back to showing us the menu. See Skylar's details. See all characters. And then we can go back and do that to somebody else. So this was just a quick refactor to make it so it's not printing the details every time unless we ask for it. So cool. So here we now can do see messages. Now, before we do that, we need a way to get a character's messages. If we go into our pry real quick. You'll note message.all has 3 messages. But if I call character.all.first.messages, we don't have a method for that yet. Anyone know how anyone want to take me through writing the messages method for a character?
So you're in character, so you'd make a method that was messages. And that would be, do you have a message.all method?
We do.
Okay, so message.all dot select,
Nice.
and then message dot message, and message dot character equals self.
Like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are we doing here?
Selecting the message.
What was that?
Are you're selecting a message, but does the message not have a character attribute? Or
So what we're doing right here, right? We're saying, hey, give me all the messages and then only show me the ones where the message's character is me, right? So if Walt is calling it, right, it's going to give me Walter White's messages. We can try this out. So now it's giving me the 3 messages that belong to Walter White, right? If I do all 2.messages, we currently don't have anything. We haven't written a message for that. But if we go ahead and now write add message, I don't even know who this is. Not a positive message. Whoops. Not something that I would approve of if I were moderating this. It's Skylar. We know Skylar. That was not supportive. But now that we've added this, it's now going to go through all of the messages again and only give me the ones that belong to Skylar when I call it on Skylar right here. So just to break this up. That's one message. Cool. We now have 2 messages for Skylar. This little select message, great. Cool. So now we can go ahead and use this. We can now we have like a choice to make, right? You can do like a little def show all show messages, print messages right here. Messages that each, let's do if messages dot any messages dot each do message put message. I'm actually going to like make it a little neater. I'm going to be like with index. I'm going to be a little fancy right here and be like, hey, I want them to all be numbered. We might change this later.
Does your messages need to be capitalized there?
No, because remember, we're just calling this method. So this
Oh,
is short
okay.
for, yeah.
Hmm.
If it's more helpful. Whoops. No. Self, right? We're implicitly calling self here. I'm going to keep that off, but here we are. You can now try this. Oh, I need that else. Let's character. Oh, come on. Has no messages yet. Be the first to add one. And cool. Great. I can run this. I don't think I haven't used this yet. But I can try this in the console, right? I can be like, hey, the first step, print messages. Whoops, message.content. There we go. Cool. We're not going to see this return statement in the pry, but now we get this happy teacher appreciation day, keep grinding, and hi there. I'm going to do I+1. So because we're in the pry, it's also giving us this return statement, which doesn't make sense. That's not going to be something we have to worry about in the command line interface. Just generally speaking, like if you call print messages, it's like your Ruby is just going to print those messages. If you're in the pry, though, it's always going to give you the return statement of any method that you call. Let me go show you that that's the case. Let's go ahead and say character, print messages. Let's see what this does. I should probably actually run the code real quick. Boop, boop, boop. Cool, Walter White, see messages. Happy teacher appreciation day, keep grinding, and hi there. Then what would you like to do? We can go back. We can see the details. We can see the messages again. We can see all characters. Go back. See. Oh no. Oh no. There's an error. This is why we test our code. So in this case, right, we're calling this on character isn't a thing here. Character is who we are. Just call self.name or name, and then it'll work. And now we can do see messages. Skylar White has no messages yet. Be the first to add one. Cool. Cool. At this point, do a little git push action. Get a lot. For this, I wrote like 8 lines of code here. What's the most confusing part about what I did? How are we feeling so far? Thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down. Cool. Do you want me to go faster, slower? How are we feeling? All right, I'll just keep up the same pace. So now we can go ahead and say, at this point, I'm going to break this across lines because this is getting to be a very big menu. Boop, boop. And we're good. So here, I'm going to now say add message. And here I'll do prompt message. Seems like a good name for a method. Then character menu. Cool. And now I'm just going to write this prompt message thing. Prompt message. And input equals at prompt.ask. What would you like to tell? And then since I've got this instance variable, I can call character.name. And then we can go ahead and say character dot add message input. And then we can go ahead and say content, just so that the users know what's going on. After that, we go back to the character menu. Let's go see what this does. See all characters, Skylar, add message. Hi, Skylar. Big fan of your work laundering money. Cool. And now we can see messages and we have a new message saying, hi, Skylar, big fan of your work laundering money. So we can now add messages. Cool. Everyone see how we did that? We just added a new thing. I promise this, use this add message method we built earlier, then puts you wrote content. And then it's saved because adding messages saves it. How do we feel about that? We just added a new feature really quickly.
Do you mind just scrolling up and showing like where the prompt is coming from? Like at prompt?
Yeah, that's this
Yeah.
bad boy.
TTY prompt. Okay.
Yeah, TTY prompt new is just gives you a prompt object that has a bunch of methods on it, like ask and stuff like that. Cool. Let's exit. Git add git commit add mess. Whatever. That's bad. I don't need to say feature for any commit. Very bad commits. Cool.
So I have one question. Can you require TDY directly on your run.rb file?
Yeah. If you didn't have a gem file, all I'd be doing right here, require TTY prompt. But still, in order to use, so I'm actually just going to show you this in the console. So I'm going to run IRB, right? IRB embedded Ruby 0.1 plus 0.2, just how I test everything. This doesn't actually give me any details. Like if I went to Node, if I was writing in JavaScript, same problem. But exit would be different. There we go. So IRB, right? I'm going to go ahead and require TTY prompt, right? In my IRB. And it's going to be like, cool, that exists. That's true. Now I can do prompt equals TTY prompt dot new. And now I can start doing like prompt dot ask, what's your favorite color? Red. So just requiring it allows you to just start using it. Since it's already installed on my computer, my gem file allowed me to like put it right here. And then if it's not installed on your computer, you don't have to worry about it because it has this little source here being like, hey, go to rubygems.org and install anything you can't find.
Okay.
So next up, we need to add the ability to have a user, right? And here I'm going to do some weird stuff. It's going to be a little bit non-standard. So basically, I'm not doing passwords. I would please ask that you be careful and try not to do passwords either. I know it's tempting, and I know that T2I prompt has that ask.secret. And I can't, for the life of me, think of a way that doesn't involve you putting a computer out in an open area where that becomes a security risk. But just generally speaking, as human beings, as developers, one of the things that I would just ask you, please never to do, never save someone's password inputs to your computer in any way, shape, or form without encrypting them first. I'm going to teach you how to do that next phase, how we can make sure that we're never storing a plain text password. For now, yes, you are just including it in your IRB command line. But eventually you might show this app to your grandma. They might type something into TTY into like, be like, hey, here's my password that I use for everything. And then worst comes to worst, you're somehow leaving in a Starbucks. That's the easiest way I could think of. She hasn't logged out of your app. Something happens. Very unlikely situation. But we as developers know that we're idiots and will make any mistake that we have the potential to make. So one point of failure, anytime you're saving someone's passwords as just plain text, you're doing something bad and evil. So don't do it. Cool. So I'm only using a username for login here. And I encourage you to do the same. It makes developers scared when they see someone store anything as a plain text, any password as a plain text. Because even if you're writing your dumb app, you can't tell people, hey, don't use the same password you use for your bank. Like, you can't tell your grandma that. They're probably still going to do that. So I want our login flow to enter a username. It will find that user if it exists already, or it will create one. So right now, I don't necessarily want to initialize with the username. I want to instead have like a different way of, I want to have like some sort of def self dot find or create by username. And so I'm going to do a lot of things that are kind of the same. But then for this method right here, I'm going to break this out into a couple of different methods. I'm going to say def find by username. First, at some point, we're probably going to need some sort of username method. Let's first do def create. Self.create username. We can just do create. And we can actually call this, since we only have one argument, we know what's going on here. I'm going to go ahead and say self.new user equals self.new. Then I kind of want to just be like, hey, user.username equals username. And we should at that point add our accessor to allow us to like write username this way. Otherwise, like, since I'm in this class method right here, I can't just call at username as username, because at in this case doesn't refer to an instance. Our self isn't a user right now. I do user.username. Then I'll do like user or self.all user. Then we can return user. To show you what this looks like, let's test this out. First, we have to require this. Here we go. Boop. This time I didn't actually run it and make the error first, so I consider that a win. User.all, currently empty. User exists. User.new will give you a user, but it won't do anything, right? It won't like go into user.all, right? User.create though, and we'll say cheese, will give us a user. User.all.first will now have this cheese. So this is an alternative to using our initialize method to create something. And now we can go ahead and build the find. Oh. Yeah, self.find Wallace not found. Cool. We can go self.find.all.find user.username equals username. And this is going to be a method we can use. So, whoops. Cool. Do you see how I built this method and how we did this? It's weird, right? Actually, we can call this find. No, that's usually I would say this is okay. Find usually refers to an actual method that a lot of people are used to. So be careful with it. I'm going to now do self-define or create. Self.create .find by username. Or if you can't find that, self.create username. Cool. Now if we do user dot create or dot find or create cheese. Then we have, like if we go to user.all, we now have cheese. User.find or create Batman. User.all is now 2, right? We can call size, it's now 2. If I do find or create and I do cheese again, it's just going to give me that first instance of the user, right? It's not going to create a new one. Want to talk about this? How are we feeling right now?
Is this something that's strictly necessary in our applications, or
No,
I
not
want to do it? But
this is going to be really helpful for our auth flow, right? Because ultimately I want people to be able to, like, if they've logged in, just log back in by using the same user, right? Using the same username. Otherwise, I just want to create it seamlessly as one method, right? This is going to give us a way to do that. Now, all I need to do for my login method is ask them for a username and then call find or create, and then I'll have a user.
Did you include the require in the gem file for pry?
Yes. Right here.
And you connected it with the environment. Let me see this bundler.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
I'm going to commit this. Great. So now we can go ahead and go back to our CLI right here. And we can go ahead and start doing some sort of a login. So there's kind of 2 ways we can do it, right? I'm thinking if at user, do all this bad boy stuff. Otherwise, else prompt login. And then we're going to have our login. Its job is to give them a user. And then we can go menu. So else prompt login and do this again. What this is going to allow us to do is we just have a way, like we have a menu function that will either redirect them to log in if they haven't logged in yet, or it'll just keep working. So I'm going to do prompt login right now. Def prompt login. Username equals prompt.ask. What's your username? Then we go ahead and say at user equals user.find or create username. So I'm just gonna like test that this works, right? By doing this. By saying, hey, if they're logged in, right? Like we have this if statement for if user, right? If they're logged in, we should be able to see their username. Like we should be able to be like, what would you like to do, username? Otherwise, it should prompt the login, set this instance variable called at user with the response, and then go ahead and show that menu again. So we can run it. What's your username? Cheese. What would you like to do, Cheese? We now have a user. We now can log in. We now have this log out feature, which I think I misnamed. I'm just going to make this def exit. Or exit app, because I think exit might be reserved. I don't know. Def logout. Make this say @user equals nil. Menu. I'm doing a lot, way too much here. I'm gonna make this log out as well. Gonna definitely see some errors because I am being bad here. Cool. Let's try this out. My username is cheese. We can log out and then it'll be like, my username is now Batman. Cool. We can see all users. You can select one, go log out. Cool. What's your username? Cheese. See all characters. Can exit. Cool. Then it exits the app. So now we've wrapped everything inside of a user flow. And in order to get access to any of our menus that don't have login, they have to, like any of our menus that show characters, they have to log in first. And we did that by just wrapping our menu with an if @user, else prompt login, and then show the menu once they're done with that. This is a lot, right? Like this whole thing right here using instance variables. I know instance variables are very new still. Feeling like putting them in a CLI class for me when I was a student made no sense. Like when you're doing like an instance variable in like in a character, like you'll know like, oh yeah, a character has a name. When a CLI has a user, like you're like, what does this mean? Instances are just a very good place to keep track of what's running inside of our CLI app. Instance variables. Because all we're doing is passing between methods. But weird, right? This feels weird. This is that advanced. This is the AP shit right here. So at this point, we now have this @user that we can use. And shoot, we are so far past the point where said we were going to do this and office hours, and we still haven't added the ability to like make a message have a user. How are we feeling right now? Do you want to switch to office hours, or do you want to see me make it so that you can actually associate this user with a message?
Maybe office hours, because I have a bunch of questions about this project now that
Cool.
I write down my questions because there are a bunch of them.
Yeah. Cool. At that point, I think we've done so much right now also. So I'm going to call it here. We'll have like a project build part 3 next Tuesday. I'll just finish this up. Sound good to everyone? Cool. I'm going to stop sharing.